Okay, we are now live and go ahead, Niquole, I'll let you take it over. Thank you guys for being here. Congratulations on a great film. Congratulations, Olive and Richard, for the award. We're very excited to be screening the film in the International Ocean Film Festival. So thank you for all your good work. And thank you for Niquole for taking over.
Great, thanks, Anna. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I'm happy to be here, joined by Richard Sidey and Olive Andrews, talk about their wonderful film, Whales in a Changing Ocean. For those of you who have joined us, I hope you've seen it. It's beautiful, it's moving, it's graceful and calming and awe-inspiring, and I just was going back and forth like this while I was watching it, between the whales and the music and the background. But I also want to point out that for those of us in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area, the film will be part of our Earth Day celebrations, and it will be screened live at the Fort Mason Drive-In. So for those of you who are able to join us there, bring your friends and family and some socially distancing drinks and snacks, and you'll see it tomorrow. But I'm happy to be joined and honored. I've known Olive for years. She's kind of awesome. I'm a fan, and I'm excited to have met Richard through this process. But I'm going to turn it over to Richard first, and then Olive to introduce themselves to you all.
Thanks, Niquole. Well, hi, I'm Richard. I'm calling from New Zealand right now, and I filmed, edited, produced this film, Whales in a Changing Ocean. So I was a one-man team down there, working with a team of brilliant scientists from Conservation International, and really it was a dream job to put together a film that really showed what these scientists were doing, and to share the information about how whales are adapting to a changing ocean. So I'm an independent filmmaker. I work on all sorts of things, but they usually involve wildlife or conservation. And I've worked with Olive for many years on a variety of different projects. So it's a pleasure to team up again in Antarctica and work with her on this. Yeah.
And Olive, you want to chat about yourself?
Thanks, Niquole. Hi, everyone. Yeah, what a privilege this film has been to make. I so enjoy working with Richard. We met actually on a voyage to the sub-Antarctic islands in New Zealand many years ago, and we've been great mates and work buddies ever since. So it was a real privilege to work with Richard in the field to make this film for you all. And obviously, the message is super important to us. But firstly, a little about me. I'm an ocean policy advisor, a marine scientist. I'm based at the University of Auckland, lecturing in a master's degree there in marine conservation and ocean governance. And I, at the moment, am a marine protected area program manager for the Antarctic and Southern Ocean Coalition. I'm also a contractor to Conservation International, which is how through which this project was designed and implemented, with very important partners from the Antarctic tourism industry, Ponant, who have started a new foundation to support science and conservation work in the areas where their ships are present doing expedition tourism. So this was a hybrid and a mix of all my favorite things: whales, expedition cruising, awesome people, and yeah, it was a real privilege to be a part of.
Great. Well, then let's get into some of the conversation, a Q&A, as it were. So a question that I had was, I noticed that this is all about, Richard, you jumped on an expedition. How does one do that? How does something like this come together? I've always heard stories from Olive's trips and things like that, but how does it actually come together? How do you get to the bottom of the world to get to be able to photograph and study whales.
Yeah, it's not easy. By far, I say in the film, the most affordable way to get to Antarctica is to go by ship. And there's a lot of expedition ships that go to Antarctica every year, most of them from Argentina. It takes about 2 days to sail down there, and it's a pretty big thing for tourism these days. Just before COVID, there were about 50,000 people going down to Antarctica every summer to have a look around. And in general, tourism down there is really well managed. It's a great opportunity to see this incredible part of the world and become ambassadors for it. And so you have all these expedition ships that go down there, and what Olive managed to do was to get a cooperation with the Penant Foundation for us to join an expedition ship and conduct our research along the side of a tourist trip, which I'm sure Olive can expand more about how that actually happened.
Thanks, Sidey. Yeah, we were incredibly fortunate. So Richard and I have both worked as expedition staff on commercial tourism ventures, expedition vessels that go to Antarctica, the Arctic, and all sorts of crazy out of the way places. And basically, you all will know and be familiar with in the Bay Area, at least, cruise ships and the large, vessels that are moving around the world all the time for tourism. But that is changing, and there is a real move towards this small, more intimate expedition cruising. And this is for, largely the people that go on these ships are well-traveled, well-educated nature buffs, and they want to go to see endangered or animals or areas of conservation concern that are very hard to get to. And a lot of the places that we visit by these sorts of ships are places that you can't get to by plane. And because you're at sea, you can interact with and see, obviously, a lot of incredible marine creatures, like albatross and whales, that you wouldn't get an opportunity to do so if you sort of flew by plane to somewhere. So this kind of cruising is increasing in popularity. COVID aside, there is a real growth in this industry, and there's now actually over 100 individual tour operators who are operating tourism activities in Antarctica, and they're all members of the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators. And Antarctica, through this association, is very well managed and protected. The tourism operators that go there have a code of how they operate in order to leave an absolutely minimal footprint. And guides like myself and Richard, who've been working there, we have to undergo a specific exam, and you have to study all the information about the species of concern, every single area that you go, like Antarctic special protected areas. You have to study and be prepared to conduct things like biosecurity at a very high level. So it's a very well managed tourism industry, and it offers passengers a berth to go and view these wild places. So we were given a special opportunity to join one of these ships, which was a Penant ship funded by their foundation, to join a passenger vessel to go to Antarctica for 2 10-day voyages back to back. So we were 3 weeks or so at sea, 4 crossings of the Drake Passage, and which is not for the faint-hearted, but these days, yeah, those ships have stabilizers. It's actually very comfortable. You can be sipping your latte and your French croissant, looking at albatross out the window. It's an incredible privilege to work on these vessels.
Wonderful. I just want to pause and say to our audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat. You'll see my eyes kind of going to the side every once in a while. I'm checking to see if there's anyone asking questions, but feel free to pick Olive and Richard's brains and ask them some questions. You guys are both are scientists, are filmmakers, and you're able to join these fantastic voyages with other tourists. Are you coming across a lot of other scientists, or how many of many others of you are out there? You know, I've always kind of wondered that myself.
Well, I guess in recent years, there's been a massive push into citizen science, which is really cool. It sort of enables anyone to be a scientist and help contribute and collect data and report sightings. And that's grown tremendously. But on these expedition ships too, you have a team of expedition staff, much like we've been involved with in the past. And they're often full of scientists and people with PhDs and researchers, and they are so good to learn off. And so really you're surrounded by really well-informed, intelligent people on these trips. And having worked on ships like this for about 20 years now, it's just been such a huge reward for this kind of work in terms of what I can learn from these people. So yeah, it's a real perk of the job for sure.
Right.
Yeah, it is. You get to mingle with some pretty cool people. So on these, like the Antarctic voyage, for instance, you would have ornithologists, glaciologists, you know, historians, marine biologists, and these people are giving a series of lectures, you know, when the ship is cruising, before you land, you know, ashore. They're doing specialist interpretation of animal behavior and you know, environmental conditions and things when you're actually out on Zodiacs interacting with the animals and or landing on the continent to explore areas or to visit one of the scientific bases down in Antarctica. So we're constantly learning from each other, which is a really, you know, brilliant kind of environment to work in. And so we're very lucky to be working with that kind of level of scientists and educators in polar regions. But I would say as well, to add to what Richard said, that the Polar Citizen Science Collective is a really excellent NGO that's doing pretty cool work where these Antarctic tourism vessels are now able to contribute in a really meaningful way to our science that is underpinning our understanding of the Antarctic Peninsula and other areas in Antarctica, which is critical for protection. And there is some new developments there I'll talk about a little bit later in the conversation in terms of marine protection in the Southern Ocean. But yeah, there are amazing people and scientists involved on these vessels, and increasingly so they're contributing to a growing body of scientific evidence being collected by citizen scientists.
That's fantastic. I didn't realize that there was such a kind of comprehensive wealth of information and people that you'll have access to on these voyages. You know, it's you kind of think of, oh, you know, you think of maybe the Antarctica and you think of maybe the whales or the seals and, you know, and the penguins, right? But if you're talking about, you know, ornithologists, you're talking about marine biologists and oceanographers and you know, climate scientists and all these people all in one place, it's really a great opportunity for an average person to learn so much about how everything is connected. We all know that, but it's, you know, it's a really great opportunity to learn about how things are all connected, and also just to kind of see how, you know, if you're interested, if you're curious about the different parts of science, right? Different parts of the environment, different you know, ways they all connect. You can be a photographer and still go down to, you know, and study whales. You know, you can be a filmmaker. You can be you can talk about all kinds of different opportunities and pathways for people to engage in the environment, right? As a, you know, beyond just right.
And we did actually do that. So with the passengers on board, as well as providing lectures and recaps, you know, every couple of days about what we were finding and our experiences while we were conducting the research, you know, we provided opportunities to involve the passengers as well in data collection. So when the ship is cruising, you know, when we come out of the Drake Passage and kind of into areas where we are going to start to be encountering whales, we get everybody out on deck. We have our data sheets out there, binoculars, you know, hydrophones, all manner of equipment. And we can, you know, involve the passengers or give them an opportunity to learn about and be involved in the data collection as well. And I would note that there are actually companies now who advertise and run, you know, specific kind of research voyages. For instance, Cheeseman's Ecology Safaris runs, you know, I think biannually now, whale research voyages to the Antarctic. So you'll go still as a paying passenger, but you're knowing that you're going with a focus to study and focus on whales. So there are some companies that are doing that as well.
Yeah, that's a fantastic opportunity to be part of it, to have that experience, right? And to take it a little bit step further than, because I've noticed in my own travels and with friends and family that it's really creating, yes, you go to a place, but you really want to be involved with, you're being much more more engaging, and you're more mature and more, I should say, kind of taking a step closer and becoming part of the place that you're going to. And that experience is what stays with you, as you go on in your years, and you tell your stories, and you kind of relive your glory days, as it were. So these kinds of opportunities is a fantastic addition and evolution of tourism opportunities, and it's fantastic. And it also, of course, brings people closer to nature, right? And makes them a part of nature, and builds that relationship, which we all, want to see. So Richard, when you've basically, you said that you've been doing this, you've been down there for 20 years, and what made you want to do this film now? What made you say this is the time?
Well, first of all, the opportunity arose, and so basically any opportunity I get to work in Antarctica, I take without really thinking about. It's just a given. It's such a privilege to visit that place that I can't say no. So I guess it was the opportunity to work with whales, to work with Olive and a really awesome team, and just another chance to get down there and take more pictures and do some more film work. What was unique for me on this assignment is I haven't been on there to Antarctica before on an assignment purely to work with whales and to document them. So that was a huge draw card. It meant that we had essentially 2 weeks just to focus on whales, and we would be down there, we'd get into a small Zodiac, the 5 of us in the team, take off for a day, for 8 hours or so on the water in our little boat, and just work with whales. We'd try to find them, do some research, and film and photograph them. So that was huge, to have that opportunity. And as a result of that, we were able to get some really beautiful footage that we wouldn't have been able to get if we had not had that primary focus. So yeah, it's Antarctica. It's just it's such a special place. It's overwhelming. It's just, as you say, it's an immersive experience. Not only being there, but being surrounded by this knowledge. And there were moments when we were filming down there that you're basically watching a natural history documentary right in front of you. And then, of course, I've got these 4 scientists narrating what's happening. So it's quite incredible. We had, in that film, we had some moments that I haven't seen before. And that's one of the beauties of Antarctica, is every time you're there, you see something that you've never seen before. One significant part was when we were able to witness a group of whales cooperatively bubble net feeding. And we just parked our Zodiac a few hundred meters away, and I was able to put a drone up and observe this behavior from the air over a few hours. And we had a hydrophone in the water. We had there was skin samples on the surface. The gulls were feeding. It was just such a incredible opportunity to have that time and to document these amazing behaviors. So yeah, I mean, it didn't take much to convince me to take this job.
I would imagine that, especially as we've been able to see the product, the results of the job. Yeah. So, and I don't want to give away too much, because that is a very special part of the film, and I might have watched it a couple times just to kind of and try to see if I could project myself onto the boat with you all. Yeah. And so I was able to achieve a little bit of success, but yes, it was just absolutely amazing to see, and I don't, I was about to say I can only imagine, but I don't really think I can. So well,
it's always been part of my goal when I'm filming, is to try and make my experience to share it with those at home and to make it as immersive as possible. So I'm bringing in sound and image and music, and trying at a minimal level to try and make those at home feel as close as they can to what it's like to be there. And I've done that through my whole career. I've made a whole bunch of movies that have no narration at all. It's just about sharing that experience. So I really tried to put that into this film in between all the scientific sections. And so hopefully you got that. Yeah.
I got it. Sure. And I'm sure our audience got it as well, because it was, I mean, yeah, like I said, I was kind of just swaying back and forth with the music and just the vibe, the whole thing, the calming kind of aspect of it. And you know, I didn't actually really even think about it until you just said it, that you're right. You know, it has very kind of minimal narration, minimal talking, and it's just really utilizing the awe and majesty of where you're at to really just take people there and make people feel, you know, whatever they're feeling at the moment. So
yeah, if you take away the narrative every now and then, it allows you to create your own narrative and
absolutely
lose yourself in your thoughts. Yeah.
So Olive, you know, I know that you study whales, you know, all around the world, and I remember having conversations with you about whales in Timor-Leste and whales in Fiji and other places. You know, what is it that makes Antarctica so special to you?
Wow. Well, it's my first voyage south. I was on a Russian icebreaker and going to the Ross Sea in 2006, and we encountered a force 11 gale for about 6 days. So my first encounter of going to Antarctica was absolutely terrifying, but totally addictive. And so I've gone back almost every season since as a guide, you know, on expedition tourism vessels. And this was a particularly special opportunity to be able to study the specific, you know, animals that I spend most of my time studying, which are humpback whales, but in their feeding grounds. So what makes it special to study whales in Antarctica is that they travel such vast distances to get there. You know, when you see them in Antarctica, you know that these animals, some of them at least that are coming from New Zealand, have swum, you know, 8,000 kilometers to get to this particular area to feed. So it's critical for these animals, which have a huge range and which travel between tropical and polar regions, you know, that we understand the kind of things, the aspects that affect their conservation at both ends of their migration, right? So we're protecting them and understanding them across their range. So we get to do that in tropical regions. It's a little more simple to launch a boat and to get, you know, out to see these whales in the areas where they're breeding in the Pacific Islands and in Mexico and Panama. But to get to study them in their feeding grounds in Antarctica, if you were to put together, you know, a dedicated research expedition, you'd have to charter an icebreaker vessel, which, you know, it starts at a you know, 6-figure you know, kind of budget. And so for us to be able to have an opportunity to join a tourism expedition and be able to conduct this work, you know, with minimal cost to the researchers, and be able to, you know, attain information which is helping us understand the biology, the acoustics, the genetics, you know, the feeding ecology of these animals. It adds a huge amount to the picture of what we know. And the whole reason we study whales is so that we can conserve them. And the reason we conserve whales is so that we can conserve, you know, our oceans at a higher level.
Great. Well, that's, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've always been in awe of how far some ocean animals travel, you know, between whales and sea turtles and whale sharks and manta rays. They just the distances, the thousands and thousands of kilometers that they travel. I still sometimes just have trouble wrapping my head around it. One time I was kind of giving a talk to a bunch of students, and I had to explain to them, you know, the sea turtles that you see here in Singapore, they actually came from Costa Rica, and their eyes just got big. And I said, yeah, you know, just think about that. All the way across. I said, yes. And then I said something along the lines of, you know, humpback whales come from, you know, from here all the way down to Antarctica. so kind of putting it into perspective for that is, you know, for children, for just for people in general to understand that these animals are truly amazing in so many different ways, and just, you know, you have to figure out their habits to be able to protect them, you know, to be able to make sure that they're still around for tomorrow and 10 years and 100 years from now. So
that's right. I mean, one of the things that I think is important as well is that when these animals are migrating super long distances, they're also exposed to a wider range of threats. So, you know, they're going through sometimes the jurisdictions of, you know, up to 7 different countries, within which there are different laws around, you know, protection of marine species, and they don't recognize the lines that we draw on maps, right, of where is a whale sanctuary and where isn't. And you know, they're competing with fishing industry, you know, for their prey, which is Antarctic krill, which is harvested, you know, on the Antarctic Peninsula where these whales are feeding, and obviously that's competing with other, you know, krill-dependent prey like the penguins, you know. So Antarctic marine resources are managed through an Antarctic Treaty convention called CAMLR, which is the Convention for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources. And this is 25 member countries who are responsible for determining, you know, the catch limits for Antarctic toothfish and krill, and for managing and protecting the unique biology of the Antarctic and Southern Ocean.
Sorry, I completely caught that. I was just trying to see if, I think I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty in seeing if there's anybody who submitted questions. I know there has to be questions out there, but I'm having a bit of trouble with my various technology sources. So I'm going to keep on going. And but CAMLR represents a kind of a regional multinational, you know, effort to conserve and manage, you know, and protect Antarctica. And as we're kind of entering into these 10 years, or as we've done these, or kind of entered into these 10 years of all of these different decade of the world, decade of the environment, oceans, things like that, these kinds of initiatives are really important around the world. And I'd love to hear about kind of the next steps that are happening when it comes to conservation in Antarctica with you know, and efforts that you're undertaking, and with your partners and other scientists and people like Richard.
Sure. Well, I would say, I mean, anyone who's watched the film and was moved by it, there is something that you can do to help. So, you know, CAMLR as a conservation convention, they have agreed over, I think around 10 years ago now, for a representative network of marine protected areas in the Southern Ocean, and they're failing to implement it. So we have 2 marine protected areas that have been declared in the Southern Ocean, the largest of which is the Ross Sea Marine Protected Area, just south of New Zealand here. But there are, importantly, this year in October, CAMLR members will be deciding on 3 new large-scale marine protected areas in the Southern Ocean, one of which is on the Antarctic Peninsula where we were filming and where the whales and penguins are feeding on krill. One is in the Weddell Sea, and the other is a network of marine protected areas in East Antarctica. Now, if these protected areas go ahead at CAMLR this year, it will constitute the largest act of ocean protection in history. So we, this year, have an opportunity to make history, to help our planet to heal and to meet our global target of 30% of oceans protected by 2030. And the only way we're going to get there is if all of those 25 nations and the EU, which is a member, agree by consensus to move forward these 3 marine protected areas. And this is kind of the problem of this particular conservation mechanism, because it requires consensus. It requires every country at the table to agree to it. And right now there is one country that doesn't agree to these 3 marine protected areas, and therefore is blocking it going ahead. And that's been now in a holding pattern for up to 8 years. So it's time for change, and it's time that we let our leaders know that these protected areas are not only needed to conserve the incredible biodiversity and unique marine life, you know, like whales, seals, penguins, and albatross, that this area is critically important to, but it's also important for every breath that we take. So the Southern Ocean sequesters about 40% of all carbon sequestered by oceans globally. It's critically important to the way that our weather systems, you know, around the world are generated. It pushes nutrients from deep water out into all of the oceans of the world. It's a pump, basically, which pumps nutrients to the oceans of the world that, you know, basically is the beginning of the food chain for all of the fish that we eat. So the Southern Ocean and the health of the Southern Ocean is actually incredibly important to all life on Earth and to each one of us individually. So what you can do is sign a petition. Go to onlyone.com/Antarctica. I hope I've got that right. And you can sign a petition there to world leaders to increase protection in Antarctica by forging ahead the declaration or the designation of these 3 new marine protected areas at Kamala this year. So the campaign's called Call on Kamala, and we've made a couple of cool little videos that you can see there on Only One Antarctica page. So yeah, check it out, and so that's what you can do to help.
Just
but you
a
can also
correction,
support. Sorry,
correction
go
there,
ahead,
Oliver. It's only.1/Antarctica.
Thank you.
only.1/Antarctica.
Perfect.
I was gonna put it into our chat, but I was struggling with that. And you know, it's thank you, Olive, for that, and definitely our audience, and for those of you who are joining us live, but also those who are going to be watching post this session here. Please, you know, do what you can and think about how you can be engaged. You know, the International Ocean Film Festival is really focused on showcasing and highlighting and sharing all of these wonderful films by all of these wonderful filmmakers and scientists and folks that are all involved with these processes. But you know, we're also looking at what we can do with our audience. You know, what we can do as an audience to be inspired to take action. And so films like this, you know, actions like what Olive is talking about, you know, you're able to be involved in many other different ways. And so, you know, Richard, how do you kind of see yourself, you know, as a filmmaker, playing this kind of role of sharing with the audience these kinds of messages and you know, going forward, you know, what are you kind of, if you were envisioning anything, you know, in the future with this kind of work and with the Antarctic and with humpback whales and things like that? Yeah,
well, I guess film is such a powerful medium. Like you're really able to engage with people and inspire people. And it's something I just love working with. And your Ocean Film Festival over there is just a prime example of this. You can't not go to your festival and not come away inspired. It's any film festival I go to, you always come away with so many ideas, your knowledge base is increased, and you're motivated to do something. For me, often it's to go and make something else. I'm sure for others it's to care more about something, to learn more about something. And so this is really my dream line of work, is to share stories about our planet and inspire people to help make a little difference, however small that might be. But I'm sure people watch this, they're going to love the ocean, they're going to love whales even more, they're going to want to know how they can help, what they can do better. And I just want to keep doing that kind of thing. I love it's such a privilege to go to places like this and work. So I love bringing a little bit of that back and sharing it en masse with the story. So yeah, it's my dream line of work. I have no plans to change that. I just want to keep going. There's so much to do and so much to tell, and oceans need us more than ever right now. So yeah, I'm just going to keep going.
Absolutely. Well, if you're able to go to places like this and Antarctica and experience some of the things that you show through your film, I wouldn't want to change that for either of you either. All of you as well, right? You're able to do this. You said you do it every season. You've been able to go down every season, so that's quite amazing. And Richard, you said you've been doing it for 20 years, so again, amazing. I'd like to, we're still, one of the parts of the film itself is that it was filmed right before the full impact of COVID happened, right, in the pandemic, and for those of you who haven't seen the film, you'll be able to see kind of the impact that had on the completion of the film, and a little bit of a commentary at the end of the film going forward. But can you talk about maybe what you think some of the impacts of COVID and I guess the stopping of tourism may have on the health of the ecosystem, on the health of the whale population, and then as we go towards, as we emerge, hopefully, knock on wood, as we emerge out of this in the next year or so, kind of what we need to think about, what we need to plan for and keep in mind, both as people who may want to who may want to be part of go as a tourist to go see the Antarctica, or those of us who are just concerned about ocean protection and ocean health.
Sure. Well, I think from the team's perspective, I mean, we were very lucky. We were on ship, and we got back into Ushuaia, and we flew out. I think there was the first cases in Buenos Aires, the day that we left, and got safely back to New Zealand. And in fact, the passengers that boarded the very same ship that we were on to go to Antarctica for 10 days, when they came back, they were not able to go back into the port of Ushuaia, and they had to, carry on up the coast and refused entry to Chile and Argentina. So, we were very, very lucky. Really count our blessings that we had, our travel was not interrupted by it, but it did, of course, mean that when Richard was editing the film, we had to conduct the interviews via, this kind of medium, which was kind of new for all of us. But also it's meant for the research itself that, quite a lot of our analysis has been hindered or halted. This was a 3-year project, and we weren't able to go the season just gone, which means that the data isn't a full picture yet. We're just sort of starting to gather, certainly for one particular aspect, which is the acoustics. This is, for me, probably one of the most pivotal outcomes of the survey, or will be when we have a few more years of data collection. The fact is that the oceans are noisy. The oceans are alive, and all of these marine creatures make their own sounds. They use sound to navigate, to communicate, and to find their food. So underwater is an incredibly, loud and busy place, just with the biology, all the creatures under there. Then when you add in Antarctica, the sound of ice. Now, when you look at an iceberg, you think it's just silent, serene, sitting there floating on the ocean. These are noisy. They are bumping and crashing and bubbling, and there's all sorts of crunching noises and squeaking noises. And the ice itself is making its own soundscape. In addition to that, you have glaciers, which are carving, off the actual the land in Antarctica, and there's banging and crashing from that. So the actual natural soundscape of Antarctica is something that's really this particular geography never really been studied, and that the interaction between the sounds of biology, the sounds of the whales, the glaciology, the sounds of the ice, and the interaction of human sounds, the anthropomorphic noises, so that the noise that is emitted from our boats, our ships. So we're looking at the interaction of those 3 things in order to determine, what the potential impact is of tourism vessels of varying different sizes and engine noise on whales and other marine life. So that's part of us understanding what the potential impacts are of tourism as the industry grows. But I would say, in terms of COVID, that, Richard makes this comment at the end of the film that the whales are having the most incredibly quiet season. You know, right now there ain't no boats down there. So they're having the quietest season that they've had in years. And, you know, when the boats come back, there's going to be more than ever. Most of the tourism operators that work there are investing in and designing beautiful, you know, purpose-built, ice-breaking, hybrid research and tourism vessels. And but they do make noise, and I have to admit that some of them that are being built though now are incredibly innovative, and they are electric hybrids. So we're aiming to reduce, you know, the impacts from ocean noise from these vessels on the whales and the Antarctic ecosystem. And certainly the tourism there is aiming to be the most responsible in the world and has a very, very good track record of doing exactly that.
Well, it's actually perfect that you ended on talking about the oh my gosh, the equipment, because we have a question. So from British Columbia, and I apologize if I butcher the name, but it looks like Menchie from British Columbia, Canada, says, I'm curious to find out about how do the ocean cruises offer commercially offer commercial options. Sorry, how do the ocean cruises that are offered commercially affect the natural environment of the whales in particular? You know, are they supposed to comply with certain regulations per se, the actual cruise companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you visit Antarctica, you have a number of things. So the vessel itself is under a strict polar code. So they have to contain, you know, all of their waste. They have to carry special fuel. There's a number of ways in which the International Maritime Organization increases the safety of the operation of vessels in those polar regions. But in addition to that, the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators has an incredibly detailed guidelines for interacting with wildlife. They have a very well organized schedule over a spatial and temporal scale, so that at each day that you're in the Antarctic, you'll have, you know, maybe 80 vessels or something like that, but they are all in different places. So they have a network. They're able to schedule where they're going to be so that they're all spread out, so that you don't have a whole bunch of vessels in one area at one time, and particularly so that you can monitor and reduce the impact on wildlife populations. So for instance, if there's a penguin colony that's being visited by 2 ships, you know, they schedule a morning visit and an afternoon visit, so that there's never, you know, more than 1 vessel, and you're only allowed a certain number of people ashore at any one time in certain places, and places of particular conservation or historical, you know, value. Those are very, very well managed, so that when we take people, for instance, into one of the historic huts in Antarctica, you know, we have to like brush our boots on big brushes and clean, you know, the soles of our feet, so we don't take little stones in there which can, you know, erode the floor, because we're dealing with, you know, 100-year-old historic venues and things like that. So there is a high degree of conservation management and tourism management in Antarctica to preserve the natural and historical world down there. So rest assured, it is very well managed. Absolutely. In fact, it's an example that I use and amplify in developing tourism in other parts of the world. You know, Antarctic tourism is a very good example that should be amplified. But I'll pass to Sidey. You might have something to add there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to imagine a more professional and environment. It's just yeah, it is. As Olive says, it's an example for the rest of the world to operate in terms of tourism. You couldn't find a better system, and it's so well done. And it's just as well because it's something that everyone that works there loves, adores, and wants to protect. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for the question, Menchie, and please, keep them coming. We still have a little bit of time left, so we want to take advantage of Richard and Olive's time and willingness to spend it with us this afternoon, or wherever you are in the world today.
It's a nice autumn morning here.
Yes, we've got a spring afternoon here, and I'm in Oakland, California. So, but keeping along the lines of serving as an example, for other tour operators. Again, everything is starting to kind of open up. There are a lot more just tourists in the number in the world, right? And so, have you kind of experienced or been able to share, the best practices, as it were, the best, the operational processes and procedures with others and around the world, as how to do and what to do and what not to do, per se?
Yeah, I think everyone's seen the ugly side of mass tourism. I myself live in a beautiful mountain town in New Zealand, but it's a tourist town. And before the pandemic, there was a real backlash, like there has been around the world, in some of these spots that have just been overrun, and the quality of life starts to degrade. And so we all know what not to do. And so when we see an example that really works, like what happens in Antarctica, that's really promising and worth sharing. I myself am not involved in implementing that anywhere else. And they have a similar system for Arctic tourism, which is modeled off the Antarctic model. So you can rest assured those very special parts of the world are really well managed. Yeah, Olive, can you add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just add that, as crew on these ships, not only are we kind of educating people about the fascinating natural world and geographies that we're going to, but it's our responsibility to make sure that we reduce the impacts of taking, say, 100 people ashore at a specially protected area. And so one of the core functions that we amplify, across all the geographies that we work in is biosecurity. And so before you get to set foot in Antarctica or any subantarctic island, we have a biosecurity exercise, which is we set up like a boot scrubbing station. You have to clean your boots and the ends of your walking sticks and anything that's been ashore in any other part of the world. And you would be fascinated by the stuff that comes off. We have vacuum cleaners, and we get into all the little Velcro strips in all your like rain jackets and all that sort of stuff, your camera gear.
Wow.
Yeah, and we, at the end of this exercise, you get 100 people and you vacuum, all of the gear that they're planning to take ashore, and you get like a Ziploc bag full of grass seeds, feathers, all manner of crap. And basically, this is how endangered species get threatened in these isolated places. Is because we bring with us various pathogens, various seeds from different plants which are invasive. And so we do a very thorough biosecurity exercise to reduce any potential for invasive species going into protected areas. And also it raises people's awareness about it, so that they can amplify that behavior on the next trip that they go on, and check their camera gear before they get on the plane to make sure that they haven't got that rock or feather that they took from another place, entering another place. I mean, yeah, if you're in a penguin colony, for instance, and you're stepping in penguin goop, and then you don't wash your boots, and then you land in another place, you could be introducing, disease or pathogens from one colony to another. So it's super important that after every single landing, we put all of everybody's shoes through a bath of biocide, or called Virkon, and then it's left to dry overnight in a wet room on the ship. So there's very thorough attention to to these super good environment protocols, and those are a standard for expedition cruising. So I would say as well that in terms of giving back and the commitment of the operators to environmental protection, our work is a very good example, because it was funded by Ponant Foundation. So this is an expedition tourism company who is so committed to the protection of the amazing places that we go, that they've set up a foundation to fund the science and conservation of those areas and protect them, into the future. So, I mean, I think for anybody out there that's listening who's interested in visiting these areas, you can now be quite discerning about which operator you go, and you can actually look at which ones offer a scientific expedition, or which ones are contributing to the conservation, and you'll find that actually most of them are contributing in some way to the protection of the places that they go through NGOs like Conservation International or their own foundations. Yeah.
And so, with our last kind of 10 minutes or so, I kind of want to shift to some of the other members on your team. You had someone who was looking at acoustics. You had someone who was thinking of and looking at the genetics and things like that. How are you? How did you find these folks, and how how are you kind of combining all the different parts of your team to present this picture, and track the health of these whales and these ecosystems in which they work, and really to combat and identify, first identify some of the challenges and the threats that they're facing, but then to combat them. How does that kind of call come together for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tricky one, to be honest, like pulling a team together. So I am one of the executives of the South Pacific Whale Research Consortium. So we're a group of scientists working together on humpback whales throughout the Pacific region. And so we have kind of a core team of scientists that have different expertise of whales. And really, I'm calling from and seeing who's available in that group for the specific dates that we were going to be away. But I have to confess, Richard Sidey was the first person on the team that I confirmed.
But he said he always signs up.
Well, yeah, she knew I'd say yes.
But because you all know that if it's not on film, it didn't happen. I mean, and this is where I think, Niquole and I know, working in conservation, that it's like you can write all the reports in the world, but the average, scientific paper is read by an average of 4 people. And so it's really important that that science communication, how we communicate our work, goes out to audiences like International Oceans Film Fest audience. And that's, for us, a critical outcome of securing the outputs of this work. So yeah, I was delighted that Richard was available to join the team. And then, of course, if you can imagine getting the data that we get, like for instance, the biopsies and the photo ID of whales, really requires understanding the animal's behavior and anticipating where they're going to move and how long they're going to dive for and things like that. So your average boat captain isn't going to cut it. You have to have a person, driving the vessel who is able to, who knows the animal behavior, is able to gauge it, position the boat in the right place at the right time so that you can get, the photograph that you need of the underside of the tail fluke, or be able to position, a crossbow to place a biopsy dart. So both Richard and Anthony were driving the boat at different times to approach the whales in a way that's in line with the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, guidelines for interacting with the animals. So we maintain a distance of 100 meters from most of our operations, and just gauge the animal's behavior. So that was, Anthony was another key person that I've worked with for many years at sea, and whose understanding of the animals is terrific, and he is a very excellent boat driver, as is Richard, amongst his many other filmmaking skills. And Lena is actually a PhD scientist who studied humpback whales and telemetry, like satellite tagging of humpback whales, of a project I was involved in from New Zealand, the Kermadec Islands. So yeah, she is very good with a crossbow. She's very good at processing samples at sea, and that's another thing that you need people who have their sea legs, who are able to communicate to the passengers, and give a lecture, which we all know a bunch of scientists who are not so good at that. So part of the decision making of bringing people on the team is their ability to be a good team player, be able to, handle their sea legs, but be able to interact with people and communicate well to people of varying cultural backgrounds, and also then to perform their specific area of expertise. So we were very lucky to have a really cool team, and the last of which is Will Ostrich, who's was a PhD candidate, who is a geneticist, is an acoustician, who was doing all of the acoustic recordings and placing a hydrophone. And we would, put out this hydrophone on a float, leave it for a couple of hours, go off and look for whales, and then come back and have to retrieve it. Well, I mean, there are currents and ice moving, and that little, recorder with the little flag sticking up, could be lost in an ice pack. So that was exciting, retrieving the hydrophone on several occasions, having to navigate through the ice to get that. And again, that requires, skill on behalf of all of the team. So I was incredibly blessed, and I think Richard would agree with me that that was one of the highlights of this assignment, was that we had just a fantastic team who did a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing easy in Antarctica. Everything takes more work than you think it should. And when you've got a team of 5 people that are really in sync and know what they're doing and understand what's happening, it makes the world of difference. So yeah, I couldn't have had a better team on this assignment. And it was hilarious as well. They're just such good people with a tremendous sense of humor. There was never a dull moment. And after 10 hours in a boat and sub-zero temperatures, that's exactly what you need to keep going. Yeah.
I must admit, when you mentioned dropping the acoustics and coming back in 2 hours, I hadn't thought about currents and ice and moving, and yeah, things can blend. I would imagine that if things get a little exciting, it could make things really exciting. Actually, it could really make your afternoon.
As I say in the film, it's a dynamic place. Everything is moving all the time. The mountains are moving with the ice coming down. The currents are strong. The tides, the wind moves the ice. Everything moves all the time. And yeah, sometimes relocating those boys, we'd all be on the boat with our binoculars scanning the horizon to see if we could see that little orange dot that the hydrophone was attached to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is $10,000 worth of equipment, mind you. So it's like
so it has to be found.
Yeah. First person to spot it got an extra turn at the buffet for dessert. Yeah.
Wow. Whew. Yeah, that's some pressure there. That is not a cheap piece of equipment. If you were you missing anybody? Were you missing any kind of, if you had the perfect kind of crew, if it was there a skill set, or I'm just trying to think,
For next year, I mean, ideally as well, we wanted to do some satellite tagging of whales, and there are various different, tags that we can use. Some are just with a suction cup, and that give us an idea of the whale's movements underwater. So we can tell things like, the pitch, the roll, the depth, the temperature, salinity, and in fact, put a camera on those tags so that we're understanding more about the whale's behavior underwater, for instance, how they're interacting with their prey, with krill, and how they're bubble net feeding. So that's kind of one aspect of the work that we would like to do. We did have a couple of people who are expert at this tagging caper, who were not able to join the survey in this particular occasion for last season. But also, as you can imagine, to do any kind of work that involves getting close to the animals, certainly if you're putting a tag in to inserting it or attaching it to an animal, this requires a high level of animal ethics. You don't sort of just argy-bargy yourself in there and slap something on a whale. You really have to consider the scientific question, the value of it, in order to use more invasive methodologies like that. So in order to determine kind of how whales are using their underwater, the topography, the ice and coralling krill and things like that, we will get a tagging expert probably for our next survey, but that can take up to a year to process the permits from various government departments and universities for the animal ethics approvals to do that kind of work. So we, of course, we need to adhere to all of those conditions, which are obviously for the safety of the animals and for the team.
So it sounds like even though you did so much and you collected so much information and you were able to, to bring together a fantastic team, there's still a lot to do. There's so much to learn. As you said, I'm sorry. As you said, it's a dynamic place. It's changing all the time, physically, with shifting waters and icebergs, but also, our knowledge is evolving, and access to equipment and technology and just scientific learning and ethical learning and all the things that govern how we interact and study and protect nature is always constantly evolving. So I hope that that you're able to kind of expand and learn more and come back and show us a longer kind of film that tells us all about krill and things like that, and it takes it a step further. But we have a couple minutes left. It doesn't look like we have any more questions, but I just wanted to kind of offer you an opportunity to give us any last thoughts or ways forward or things that have popped up in your brain during this session. Thank you so much for spending the time with me and us.
Thanks, Niquole. Yeah, I love your idea of coming back with a feature film, and that is the ultimate aim, to tell the full story of the 3 years of research, which is now going to be longer due to the pandemic. But yeah, it'll be great to be back at Oceans Film Festival in a few years' time and give you a wider view and also the results of some of this research. I'd like to say thanks to your audience over there, and hope they're enjoying all those films. It's great. I'm watching it back here, so to see your film festival from the other side of the world is another little unexpected perk from the pandemic, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks again. It's my 3rd time to be involved in this festival, so I would say thank you very much, and I hope to see you again in future years.
Absolutely.
Over to you, Olive.
Thanks. Thank you, Niquole and Anna and Richard for joining me in this Q&A. Thank you so much for allowing our film to enter this amazing festival. Congratulations, Richard, on the award. We're incredibly proud to be affiliated and part of your amazing skills. It's so inspiring to work with such amazing people. And I would just say that our work, the ultimate aim of it is to protect the Southern Ocean and Antarctica. We aim to contribute to the understanding of these places so that we can better conserve them. So when you jump off this Q&A, head to only.1/Antarctica, sign the petition to get us the largest act of ocean conservation in history.
Yes, and you'll be able to see it in the for those you see it in the live stream chat, and absolutely go and do what you can, and we look forward. Thank you so much. Thank you for spending time with us. Thank you for putting together this wonderful film. Thank you for your conservation work, and have a good rest of the day, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks
so much.
Bye.
Bye.